My husband died in a stranger's townhouse, yet his family still expected me to finance the funeral. When his mother tried to put the deposit on a card tied to my account, she discovered something she had never considered. The woman they had lied to for years was no longer available to rescue them. 4 days after Daniel Mercer died, his mother pushed a black credit card across the polished desk at Haven Ridge Funeral House. She had already selected a bronze casket, imported white roses, a string quartet, and a catered reception for 150 guests. The estimate came to $26,480. Daniel deserved elegance, she said for the third time, pressing a folded handkerchief beneath perfectly dry eyes. The funeral director, a calm woman named Ruth Ellison, picked up the card. What happened after she entered the amount is the reason I am telling this story. But the story did not begin with a declined payment. It began in a hospital corridor on a rainy Tuesday night. At 10:47 p.m., my phone rang while I was rinsing a coffee cup in the kitchen. The caller identified himself as a physician from St. Catherine Medical Center in Grayford. He said my husband had suffered a massive cardiac event and that I needed to come immediately. I remember asking him to repeat Daniel's name. Daniel was 43. He cycled before sunrise, counted his cholesterol, and treated a sore throat like a government emergency. 3 hours earlier, he had texted that he was meeting investors at a hotel near the river and would probably stay late. I reached the hospital in 12 minutes. I cannot remember stopping at a single traffic light. Near the intensive care unit, a nurse stepped in front of me. Her badge read, Lena Ortiz, night supervisor. She had silver threaded through her dark hair and the careful expression of someone who knew that one sentence could permanently divide a life into before and after. Are you Claire Mercer? Yes, where is my husband? The cardiac team is still working on him, she said. Then she lowered her voice. Before you enter the waiting room, there is something you should know. She glanced toward the double doors. Your husband was not brought in from a hotel. He collapsed at a private townhouse on the north side. The woman who lives there called emergency services. She followed the ambulance here. For several seconds, I heard only the soft machinery behind the walls. My mind offered explanations as fast as it could manufacture them. A client, a colleague, someone from the investment meeting. Perhaps the townhouse belonged to a business partner. Thank you, I said, because politeness survives long after understanding stops. The nurse touched my sleeve. Mrs. Mercer, go in with your eyes open. The waiting room was already full. Daniel's mother sat in the corner. His father stood by the window. His brother held his phone. Beside them was a woman in a wrinkled navy dress, holding Vivian's hand like she belonged there.
Vivian looked up when I entered. At last, she said. Not Claire, not are you all right, not even I'm sorry. At last, as if I were the final person delaying an appointment. I looked directly at the stranger. I'm Daniel's wife. Who are you? The woman looked at the carpet, more irritated than ashamed. Vivian rose and moved between us. This is not the moment. Her name is Elise. She and Daniel have been close for years. His father, Martin, kept staring through the rain-streaked window. It was friendship, he said, nothing more. Years. No one reacted. His brother, Owen, continued scrolling. Vivian kept one hand behind her, still touching Elise's shoulder. A family does not become that comfortable with a stranger unless she stopped being a stranger a long time ago. I wish I could say the truth arrived all at once. It didn't. Truth came in fragments and grief kept sweeping them away before I could arrange them. So I sat opposite Elise beneath a silent television. For almost 5 hours, no one explained why she had been in Daniel's townhouse or why Vivian comforted her instead of me. At 3:38 in the morning, a doctor came through the double doors. Daniel's heart had stopped again. This time they could not restart it. Vivian screamed his name. Martin gripped the windowsill. Owen finally put down his phone. Elise covered her face. Then Vivian reached for her. I watched my mother-in-law pull my husband's mistress against her chest, while I remained alone in a plastic chair. That was the moment the room became silent for me. Daniel was dead, but another fact was beginning to breathe. My marriage had probably died years earlier, and everyone around me had attended the funeral, except me. Elise disappeared before dawn. She never introduced herself. She never apologized. By Saturday evening, I knew her full name, where she lived, and exactly how long she had been sleeping with my husband. To understand how I found out, you need to know what I do. I'm a forensic accountant for an insurance firm. For 16 years, I have investigated claims whose numbers refuse to cooperate. I trace transfers, compare signatures, rebuild timelines, and notice when a receipt tells a different story than the person holding it. At work, I trust records. At home, I trusted Daniel. For 12 years, I considered that difference love. Daniel called himself a business development advisor. His income changed every month. Mine did not. My salary paid the mortgage on our house in Belmere, the taxes, both vehicles, and most of his temporary business expenses. It also supported his family. Vivian had a card on my account for groceries. Martin's motorcycle insurance came from my checking account. Owen, 35, was still on our mobile plan. Each arrangement began with Daniel speaking gently, just until they get stable. They would do the same for us. You know how Mom worries. I did know how Vivian worried. I simply failed to understand that her worry always ended with my signature.
The morning after Daniel died, Vivian came to my house carrying a leather notebook. My younger sister, Rachel, had driven 3 hours to stay with me. She was standing by the stove making tea no one wanted when Vivian sat at my kitchen table and began listing funeral expenses. Daniel should be buried in the Mercer family section beside his uncle, she said. I've already contacted Haven Ridge. They need a deposit to reserve Saturday. She flipped a page. There will be flowers, transportation, the reception, and the obituary package. You'll take care of the payment, naturally. Rachel turned from the stove. He was your son. Vivian's mouth tightened, and Claire was his wife. She manages the finances. That part was true. I managed them because I had created them, funded them, and repaired them every time Daniel's consulting business had another disappointing quarter. Vivian left after 20 minutes. She did not hug me. She did not ask whether I had slept. She simply reminded me that the funeral appointment was scheduled for Wednesday morning. That night, sleep never came. At 12:40 a.m., I carried the family tablet from the kitchen into the living room. Daniel used it for email, calendars, travel bookings, and music. He never logged out because I had never given him a reason to. For 12 years, I had never searched his messages. I told myself I only wanted photographs. The first image in the shared gallery was taken 2 days before his death. Daniel sat in a candlelit restaurant, smiling into the camera. A woman's hand rested against his chest. Her nails were painted silver. I kept scrolling. There were pictures from wine bars, hiking trails, hotel balconies, and a beach I had never visited. Then I opened his messages. Elise Warren was pinned at the top. Their conversation went back almost 3 years. I read until sunrise. Dinner reservations every other Friday, on nights Daniel claimed he was meeting clients, weekend trips disguised as conferences, a cabin outside Fairview, a boutique hotel in Savannah, a diamond pendant purchased for $1,850 from our shared card during the same month I canceled a vacation because Daniel said money was tight. Then I found a receipt from our 11th wedding anniversary. Daniel had told me he was in Chicago negotiating a contract. He called from the airport and apologized for missing dinner. I ate alone and sent him a photograph of the cake I had bought. The hotel on the receipt was 14 minutes from our house. That was when my hands began to shake. I walked to the bathroom, leaned over the sink, and waited to be sick. Nothing happened. Then I returned to the tablet. Because when numbers and stories disagree, you do not stop after finding the first lie. You open the entire file. At 5:23 a.m., I discovered the family group chat. Vivian, Martin, Owen, Daniel, Elise. 26 months of messages. Birthday greetings, restaurant plans, photographs from family dinners I had been told were just the men. Vivian sent Elise hearts. Owen joked that she was Daniel's upgrade. Martin reminded Daniel to delete hotel confirmations before coming home. They had all known. They sat at my Christmas table, ate food purchased with my money, thanked me for being generous, and then went home to help my husband hide another life. I stopped reading like a grieving wife. I began reading like an investigator. I took out a yellow legal pad and started building a timeline.
By Saturday afternoon, the legal pad had become a map of my marriage. I downloaded 3 years of bank statements, credit reports, card histories, and tax records. You never audit only one suspicious charge. You audit the system around it. That was how I found an account I had never opened, a Meridian Platinum card in my full legal name. It had been opened 21 months earlier and linked to an email address identical to mine. The balance was $7,284. The charges traced Daniel and Elise's relationship more clearly than photographs could. Restaurants, hotels, a spa weekend in Charleston, flights to Portland. Minimum payments came from the account Daniel called his business reserve. I tried to invent an innocent explanation. Perhaps I had signed something and forgotten. Perhaps the bank had confused my information with another customer's. Then I found the application in Daniel's email archive. My name, my identity number, my employer listed as unemployed spouse, and beneath it, a signature trying to imitate mine. There is a precise term for opening credit in another person's name. Marriage does not make it gentler. Identity theft. I printed the application, dated the first page, and placed it in a folder. On Sunday morning, I opened Daniel's drafts. Sent messages show what people were willing to admit. Drafts show what they were still planning. The first document was a beneficiary change form for a $300,000 life insurance policy we had purchased 10 years earlier. My name appeared under current beneficiary. Under new beneficiary was Elise Warren, 100%. The form had been completed 19 days before Daniel died, but never submitted. He had filled it out, saved it, and waited. Then his heart stopped before he could finish removing me from the last thing I had insisted we protect. The second file was a screenshot of messages between Daniel and Vivian. Don't make sudden moves until more accounts are under your control. Daniel, I'm handling it. Vivian, stop using the shared card for Elise. Claire notices numbers. Daniel, she hasn't noticed yet. Vivian, because she trusts you. Keep being sweet and she'll sign whatever you put in front of her. She always does. I stood in the kitchen my salary had paid for and read the sentence again. She always does. For years, Vivian had called me generous, dependable, the daughter she never had. Now I understood those had never been compliments. They were instructions. Daniel's family had not merely protected his affair, they had helped him prepare an exit. Vivian had studied my loyalty, turned it into a weakness, and taught her son how to use it. Something inside me stopped trembling. I did not call them or confront Elise. I did not post a photograph or message. I made 3 copies of everything. One for me, one for an attorney, and one for the day they claimed none of it had happened. Monday, I was waiting outside Belmere Bank before doors opened.
At 8:57 Monday morning, I became Belmere Bank's first customer. I asked for the branch manager, Samuel Price, who had handled our refinance 6 years earlier. I placed the folder on his desk and told him Daniel had died. Then he opened the documents. The joint accounts carried rights of survivorship. The instant Daniel died, every dollar in them legally became mine. I closed each one and moved the funds into new accounts under my name alone. New numbers, new cards, no authorized users. Vivian disappeared from the grocery account at 9:32 a.m. Martin's access vanished next. Every card tied to the old accounts was canceled before 10. Then I showed Samuel the fraudulent Meridian card. He compared the application with my identification and went silent. This needs our fraud department immediately, he said. He printed the dispute forms and helped me place a security alert on my credit file. Before I left, he asked, "Are you sure you want every connection removed today?" I have never been more certain. Tuesday morning, I met an estate attorney named Helen Ward. Her office sat above a bakery, so the worst week of my life would forever smell faintly of cinnamon. Helen had practiced probate law for nearly 30 years. She read my timeline, bank records, Daniel's messages, the insurance form, and Vivian's instructions. 3 things, she said. 1 finger. First, Daniel's funeral expenses belong to his estate. They are not automatically your debt. Whoever signs the authorization becomes responsible for anything the estate cannot cover. Do not sign. A second finger. The credit card is identity theft and forgery. His death erases neither. You need a police report, a fraud affidavit, and copies of every original file. A third. Daniel's tablet, laptop, and papers remain with you or my office. If anyone asks for them, say, "Speak to my attorney." I asked whether cases like mine were common. Helen looked at Vivian's message. "Death is common," she said. "Families hiding affairs are common. Forging a spouse's name is less common, but not rare enough." That afternoon, I took the file to Grayford Police. The officer at the front desk barely glanced at it. "Married finances get complicated," he said. "This may be civil." The account was opened without permission using my identity number and a forged signature. He shrugged. Then a woman at the next desk stood. Her badge read, Detective Priya Shah, Financial Crimes. She compared the application with my signature and examined the file metadata. "A forged application remains forged," she said. "Marriage does not authorize identity theft." She opened a case herself and handed me a card with the report number on the back. "People often feel guilty reporting relatives," she said. "Do not apologize for protecting your name." I placed the card in my folder. Then I went home and quietly closed every service Daniel's family had mistaken for a permanent entitlement.
Martin's motorcycle insurance was set to end with the billing cycle. Owen's number was removed from my mobile plan, streaming passwords changed, and every profile was deleted. I made no announcement. The funeral meeting was scheduled for Wednesday. Vivian spent 2 days telling relatives that I was taking care of everything. I did not correct her. Tuesday evening, the doorbell rang 3 times. Vivian stood on the porch with her car running. "I need Daniel's things," she said. "His laptop, the tablet, the papers from his office. A mother should have her son's belongings." Her eyes moved past me toward the kitchen counter where the tablet usually sat. She knew what was on it. Of course she did. Her messages were part of the evidence. "Everything is with my attorney," I said. Her face hardened. "You had no right. I protected it." "From whom?" I held her gaze. "You should rest. Tomorrow may be difficult." For 1 second, something honest appeared on her face. Fear. Then it vanished behind anger. "You're grieving, Claire. You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing." I closed the door gently. At 9:18 p.m., Owen sent his first message since Daniel's death. "Whatever you think you found, tomorrow is about my brother. Don't humiliate this family." Not, "I'm sorry," not, "Are you okay?" A warning. I did not answer. I spent the next 4 hours arranging evidence into 3 binders. Bank records, photographs, messages, the forged application, the beneficiary form, Vivian's instructions. Near 2 in the morning, I sat on the edge of my bed and understood the choice before me. I could go to Haven Ridge, sign whatever Vivian placed before me, and preserve the role they had written for me. Reliable wife, generous daughter-in-law, quiet woman who paid. I could purchase the bronze casket, roses, musicians, and a reception for 150 people. Daniel could not have named 150 people. Vivian did not want mourners. She wanted an audience. Through every selection, she repeated, "Only the best for my son," pressing a folded tissue beneath eyes that never produced a tear.
Ruth totaled the selections in careful handwriting.
With the burial preparation, cemetery fees, and reception, she said, the estimate is $26,480. We require $9,000 today. Vivian removed the black card connected to my former account and slid it across the table. We'll take everything. My name was printed on the front. Ruth carried the card to a terminal. The machine processed, then gave a sharp tone. I'm sorry, she said. The payment was declined. Vivian's expression flickered. Try it again. Ruth did. The same tone sounded. Declined. For the first time in 12 years, Vivian's polished smile failed. There must be a bank error, she said with a bright laugh. My daughter-in-law handles the accounts. Then she turned to me. Tell her, Claire. Everyone looked at me. Martin's hands were folded. Owen leaned back, waiting for me to obey. Ruth still held the card. I stood slowly. There is no bank error. The room went silent. I closed the joint accounts Monday morning. I opened new ones in my name and removed every authorized user. That card stopped working at 9:32. Vivian stared at me. You canceled my card? It was never your card. I placed the first binder on the table. Martin, the motorcycle insurance ends this month. Owen, your phone line leaves my account Friday. How dare you? Vivian said. I opened the second binder. Elise Warren, nearly 3 years. No one moved. Here are the restaurants, hotels, trips, and the pendant Daniel bought using our shared card. Here is the hotel 14 minutes from my house on our anniversary, while he told me he was in Chicago. Martin lowered his eyes. I turned another page. And here is your family group chat. 26 months with Elise, birthday wishes, dinners, photographs, and advice on hiding expenses from me. Owen's face went pale. Vivian pushed back. You searched his private messages? He used my identity to open a credit card. Privacy stopped being the issue. I placed the forged application beside her funeral binder. This account carries a balance of $7,284. The police report identifies it as identity theft. The bank has the original file. Vivian looked from the paper to me. You reported your dead husband? I reported a forged application. You would destroy his memory over money? I opened the marked page. No, this is about what all of you believed I was. Then I read her words aloud. Keep being sweet and she'll sign whatever you put in front of her. She always does. Vivian lost her color. You wrote that while helping Daniel move control of our finances before leaving me? I closed the binder. You were right. I signed for groceries, insurance, phones, and 12 years of emergencies. But I am finished signing. Daniel's mother looked at me as though I had broken a sacred agreement. Perhaps I had. The agreement was that they could betray me privately while I supported them publicly.
Vivian's voice dropped to a whisper. You would do this at your husband's funeral? He stopped being my husband when he built another life and invited all of you into it. That is not fair, Martin said. You told me at the hospital Elise was only a friend. Your messages include dinners with her and reminders to hide receipts. Fair left this family long before I did. Owen stood. You're making this about yourself. My name is on the forged application. My money paid for the trips. Your mother just tried to spend $9,000 from my account. It was always about me. I was simply the last person informed. Vivian pressed both palms against the table. Daniel is dead. He cannot defend himself. No, and I cannot ask why he planned to replace me as beneficiary 19 days before he died. I placed the insurance form beside the credit application. For several seconds, even Vivian had nothing to say. Ruth remained at the head of the table, her expression professionally calm. I turned to her. Am I required to pay for any of these arrangements? No, she said gently. Responsibility belongs to whoever signs the authorization. Funeral costs may be claimed against the estate, but you are not personally obligated unless you agree in writing. Thank you. Ruth looked toward Vivian. Mrs. Mercer, would you like to continue with the selections as listed? The silence lasted long enough for the wall clock to become unbearable. Vivian stared at the total. $26,480 looked different when it belonged to her. Martin cleared his throat. Perhaps the bronze casket is unnecessary. The quartet too, Owen muttered. Vivian turned on them. You both agreed Daniel deserved the best. Martin studied the catalog. We agreed when we thought the estate could cover it. There it was. Not love, not honor, budget. I gathered my binders. My attorney will provide the estate information. It can support a respectful service, not a performance for 150 people. Vivian looked at me with open hatred. You will regret humiliating us. I spent 12 years being useful to people who humiliated me in private. Regret has already had its turn. I placed the dead card in front of her. I am not your emergency fund, I am not your family subscription, and I am not signing anything today. Then I thanked Ruth and walked out. The sky over Grayford was the color of wet concrete. I sat in my car with both hands on the wheel until the shaking stopped. It took 13 minutes. I did not cry. Maybe grief cannot arrive while you are still protecting yourself from people who expect to profit from it. The funeral took place 6 days later. There was no bronze casket, quartet, or imported roses. Daniel was cremated. The service was held in a church fellowship room with 70 folding chairs and supermarket flowers. Vivian signed the contract and paid the difference. I attended with Rachel and sat in the last row. I listened to Daniel described as loyal, generous, and devoted to family, and wondered how many people knew they were hearing fiction.
The $300,000 policy was deposited into an account carrying one name, mine. I paid the remaining mortgage balance, covered legal fees, and kept enough untouched that I would never again confuse dependence with love. Martin's motorcycle remained in his garage for nearly 3 weeks while he arranged his own insurance. Owen's number stopped working on a Friday afternoon. He sent one angry email from a new address accusing me of punishing everyone for Daniel's mistakes. I did not answer. Vivian contacted me once. 10 days after the funeral, a message appeared on my phone. The television apps are gone. No apology, no mention of her son, no acknowledgement of the years they had lied to me, just a complaint sent to the person she had mistaken for a utility company. I blocked the number. The silence that followed became the most truthful conversation Vivian and I had ever shared. I kept the house in Belmere. My salary had qualified for it by itself because, in every practical sense, my salary had been carrying it alone. The refinance closed 4 months later at the same title office where Daniel and I had signed the original mortgage papers. When the notary pointed to the line marked sole owner, I laughed once before I could stop myself. She did not ask why. I signed slowly. For years, my signature had been treated like a family resource. It had paid bills, extended favors, and solved problems I had never created. This time, it gave something back to me. Rachel helped me clear Daniel's office. We packed his clothes into donation bags and placed the objects the estate required in labeled boxes. I expected every drawer to contain another secret. Most held nothing remarkable. Dead pens, old conference badges, chargers for devices we no longer owned. That was almost worse. A life can contain enormous betrayal and still leave behind ordinary clutter. I kept one photograph from the first year of our marriage. In it, Daniel was laughing beside me on a pier, before the mortgage, before his family learned how easy it was to make me responsible for everyone. I do not know whether the man in that photograph was real. I only know that I was. Before the year ended, I mailed a card to St. Catherine Medical Center, addressed to Lena Ortiz, the night supervisor who had stopped me in the corridor. She had risked an uncomfortable conversation for a stranger. Go in with your eyes open. No one else had offered me that mercy. I wrote, "You warned me when everyone else planned to keep me blind. My eyes were open. Thank you." She never replied. She did not need to. Sometimes on quiet Sunday mornings, I sit alone in my kitchen and think about the hospital waiting room. 5 hours beneath fluorescent lights, surrounded by people who already knew the truth. I remember the first words Vivian spoke when I arrived. At last. For 12 years, she had been waiting for me to appear whenever something needed payment, permission, or rescue.
Whenever the groceries ran high, Claire would handle it. Whenever Martin's insurance renewed, Claire would handle it. Whenever Owen needed another year on the phone plan, Claire would handle it. Whenever Daniel's business stumbled, Claire would handle it. And when Daniel died, Vivian assumed the funeral would be no different. She had spent years calling me sweetheart because it was easier than calling me what I was to her, funding. For a long time, I believed generosity made me part of their family. I thought every favor built trust, that every bill I quietly absorbed purchased security for the people Daniel loved. But generosity does not create love in people who only value access. It creates expectation. That was the lesson I carried out of Haven Ridge Funeral House. Not that revenge feels good. It didn't. Not that winning erases betrayal. It doesn't. The declined card did not restore my marriage or make Daniel honest. The insurance payment did not return 12 years or remove the image of Elise holding Vivian's hand in that hospital room. What changed was smaller and more important. I stopped believing that protecting myself made me cruel. For months, relatives I barely knew sent carefully worded messages. Some said grief could make people irrational. Others suggested I forgive Vivian because she had lost a child. I had lost a husband and discovered I had never truly possessed the marriage I was mourning. No one asked me to forgive myself for surviving it, so I did that without permission. I changed the locks, I repainted Daniel's office and turned it into a reading room. I removed the oversized dining table his family had occupied every holiday and replaced it with a smaller one that fit the life I actually had. The first Christmas after his death, Rachel came over with takeout. We ate from paper cartons, watched terrible movies, and did not discuss who had paid for anything. At midnight, I realized the house felt peaceful rather than empty. There is a difference. Empty is something missing. Peaceful is something no longer taken from you. I still keep the 3 binders, not because I expect another legal fight, but because they remind me of the morning I finally trusted evidence more than excuses. The first binder contains what Daniel did. The second contains what his family knew. The third contains what I did next. That one is my favorite. Sometimes I think about Vivian standing at the funeral home table after the terminal rejected her card. For one moment, she looked less like a grieving mother than a customer whose membership had expired. She had believed access to me was permanent. She was wrong. Accounts close, passwords change, signatures can be refused. A woman can spend years being treated like a resource and still remember that she is a person. Vivian called me sweetheart because she thought sweetness meant surrender. At Haven Ridge, sweetheart stood up. And the family that had mistaken my patience for permission finally learned the cost of taking from an account they had never once paid into.